Call of Duty World War II has been released for quite a while now. It came out on November, and ever since then has been regarded as one of the most prominent shooters of the year. But it's also been going through a stage of some controversy, mostly surrounding on how good or mediocre the game actually is. Now, Call of Duty World War II, to many COD fans, has been looked at as the return to the series' roots, the boots on the ground game that finally is the first game that one could actually call a Call of Duty game, a true Call of Duty game in years. And frankly, I do agree with that statement. However, there's the other side of the argument that states that while that is true, doesn't stop it from being mediocre. And well, I kind of agree with that as well. Now, before you hate, we need to kind of look in depth of why this is the case. Why, despite Call of Duty going back to this old formula, this old working formula, that it's still receiving backlash. Because I think the key principle of what modern gaming is using as an excuse for things when it comes with change versus going back to an old style is that when a game goes back to an old style and it's not received that well or doesn't sell or populate the way that it should, people automatically blame that on the gameplay style itself. That's back to the old style of gameplay and saying that, well, you guys asked for it and you get it and you still aren't happy. That people still aren't playing it. It's an old archaic type formula. And I think that's a really subjective and naive way to look at things. You see, games as a whole, with anything, it doesn't matter how great your gunplay is or how great your mechanics are if the game surrounding that isn't good. And that's the problem with World War II. The gunplay and the general mechanics, the things that make up a Call of Duty game, are good. Heck, I would even call them great in many areas. But the absolute problem with this is that while they are great, what else is there to Call of Duty World War II? And I'm asking that as a legitimate question. What else is there to love about the game except that it's just a Call of Duty game that feels like a Call of Duty game? Well, honestly, at least through me, I can't say how others feel, but I don't think there's anything else going for the game. And that's because the content and the general things surrounding the game aren't good. The content level is very lackluster. The modes aren't that inspiring. In fact, if anything, I would consider a lot of the new modes just rip-offs from other shooters. I would easily call out that The Division is just a more restrictive form of customization that the prior titles have had. And last but not least, Zombies has become an over-convoluted mess. Now, with this, it all comes together with a neat bow, or should I say loot box, or supply drop, whatever you want to call it these days. My gosh, gaming. But it's all surrounded by a microtransaction system. And now, here we have, in conclusion, with the tight bow, Call of Duty World War II. Now, I don't want to go out and say that this game is bad, because it's not. The gunplay is great, but when people look at it and say that this alone makes Call of Duty World War II a great thing, I don't think they're really taking into account that, yes, while it's great to have that nostalgic feeling come back, there's more to a game than that. There's more than a game than nostalgia. The same way how there's more to a movie than nostalgia. And if you want a good example of why going back to an original feel doesn't automatically guarantee a medium's greatness, here's an example. Star Wars The Force Awakens, the movie. Now, Star Wars Episode 7 The Force Awakens, as an example, is a movie that came out in 2015. It was regarded highly praised by the critics, and for a time, it was pretty much loved by all the fans because it was the first Star Wars movie we got in years. It went back to the original roots of Star Wars, and everyone loved it. However, The Force Awakens was also criticized not only for being sort of more the same, more or less, but also that the competence of its writing and its general structure had tons of issues. Things that crippled the overall story. Even though it was technically a traditional Star Wars movie, it still had issues. And this is the same way here. Call of Duty World War II, while being a traditional Call of Duty in every respect of the word, doesn't automatically guarantee its success. Doesn't automatically guarantee it being a great game. Because while the formula itself hasn't aged at all, the gameplay, oh my gosh, the things surrounding the game have aged. They have aged quite a bit. And that's mostly because of the fact that there's still no innovation. Now, usually, people see innovation as a bad thing. They say, oh, innovation? That's just changing the game. That, it's just changing the game and it's not the same Call of Duty anymore. That's not how innovation works. You can do innovation without changing the core formula. And I think that's something games are really struggling to understand in the modern age. You don't have to change the formula to be innovative. And in general, because there's two principles of where you can innovate. You either innovate the way the game is played or what the game is played by. Like, basically, what you will play or how you will play it. And usually, you're supposed to change what you play. Or more importantly, add what you play. Basically, create new modes, maps, general interactions, and things that surround a game that make it more interesting. But modern games have taken the route of changing how to play the game rather than what way to play the game. And with this in mind, it caused games to stray away from their formulas. However, when they go back to the classic formulas, such as Call of Duty World War II, some of them are polished, but in World War II's case, it thinks that going back to the original formula will be enough to circulate fans, enough to stop the decline that the series has went through. But that is not the case, and that's not even close to the case, and simply saying that is foolish. While Call of Duty World War II, in many respects, is good in a lot of areas, it has problems. It has things that are generally bad about the game. It still could use a tech upgrade as far as its engine goes. The modes are still pretty much the same as ever. Most are uninspiring. The customization is more limited than ever. And all this combined, it still has a microtransaction system that's intrusive, anti-consumer, and overall negatively impacts the longevity of the game. Now, I'm not going to go and lie and say that, oh, this is the worst thing that's ever happened in Call of Duty. We'll never get a game hopefully as bad as Ghosts. But that doesn't change the fact that while Call of Duty World War II may be a good game, it doesn't have the principles to be a great one. And that's because, as a whole, this game lacks any sense of new innovation and creative output. And in order for Call of Duty to stop this decline, that's what it needs to do. It managed to get it back to the original formula, but it didn't manage to add anything with it. And sadly, this is what's killing this franchise right now, is that it lacks the innovation to make Call of Duty interesting again in the modern market. So how can they fix this? Well, pretty simple actually. You innovate the game in a way that doesn't intrude the original COD formula. You make it interesting. You do things that are great for the series that feel new and refreshing. The war mode was a good start to this, but it wasn't far enough. It wasn't something that really was that risky or that innovative. It was just regular modes, except kind of put in an order. And, well, that's not enough. If Call of Duty truly wants to rise back to the top, it needs to do things that make the series interesting again. They need to do things that make the game really enjoyable. And as a whole, if they innovate and create a brilliant game surrounding these amazing mechanics and this awesome core fundamental gameplay, then that will be the difference between a good Call of Duty and a great one. Till next time.